The month of August 2024 is a more special one because over and above commemorating our heroes' holidays, remembering the sons and daughters of Zimbabwe who sacrificed their lives for our liberation, we are also going to be holding the SADC summit where the bloc of Southern Africa comes together and it discusses issues of mutual concern. My name is John Masogo, and this is Economic Forum where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. There can be issues to do with mining, with agriculture, tourism, education, and different facets of life to see how they affect us economically. And today, we are going to be talking about African liberation, especially economic liberation. Because when our countries got their independence, they got political independence, but they are still struggling to make sure that they're up there with regards to economic liberation. And our guest is Dr. Bernard Kusena, who is an economic historian. Welcome to Economic Forum.
Welcome, sir.
Yes.
How are you?
Fine, and you? Mm-hmm. This issue of economic liberation is very important. It takes us back to 1957 when Ghana became independent, and the statements that were said by the founding president Kwame Nkrumah, especially when he addressed the Organization of African Unity in 1963, and he talked about the importance of African unity and economic liberation. Let's take it from there. What do we understand by economic liberation?
First, we must appreciate that Africa was a colony from as far back as anyone can remember. And with that, it took a long time for Africans to gain independence, right? Turning to the question of African liberation itself, we are aware that our main concern then was to do with the political independence. That is to disentangle ourselves from political bondage. And it so happened that around 1957, as you have already alluded to, Ghana got its independence, and then following which were the rest of Africa, but at various stages. And for us as Zimbabwe, that was 1980. But and also it signaled that we had a lot to do in order to achieve that independence. So when we got the political independence, the next question was to do with the economic independence, economic liberalization, in which we were talking about decolonizing the economy, that is freeing ourselves from colonial bondage, even neo-colonial. Even if we have acquired political independence, that is at 1980, we still have a long way to go to realize economic independence. And in this case, we are looking at a number of issues, a number of aspects, a number of areas to do with the economy itself. So briefly, what I can for now say is that economic independence or economic liberation is the ability of a country to rid itself of the octopus clutches of the enemy, the East enemy. Even if the Europeans are no longer hands-on in the African economies, they are still behind, some major multinational companies and any other form of neo-colonial, projects, where Africans continue to be, second fiddle. They are not exposed to the economy. If anything, they are just laborers, assistants too, and not competitors with these, MNCs and so on. Mm. So I can conclude this part by pointing out that it's now time where we need to reorganize ourselves as Africans and hit the ground running where the economy matters. Yes, we've won political independence, but they're now focused on expanding our interests in developing ourselves on the economic front, industrialization, innovation, and all such things that are the pillars of the economy.
Yes. Dr. Kusena, while we were there, what steps did we take as Africa, independent Africa, to ensure that although we had liberated ourselves, we started right from there to make sure that we understand, where the power is with regards to taking over, our economies, so that we're also in charge. Because the colonizers in the first place, when they came to Africa, they were looking for raw materials, and they still wanted them even when we got independence, and which is why you talked about neo-colonialism.
We need to realize that for us to be engaged into the economic affairs of our nations as Africa, we look at the various pillars of the economy itself. So one of the things that the neo-colonialists or even the colonialists focused on were areas such as agriculture. For instance, Zimbabwe, then Rhodesia, was known for production of tobacco, maize, beef. And these three pillars that I've just mentioned were key to the European economy then in this country. So as we obtained our independence at 1980, our first task was to look at how best we could be involved in agriculture. But we are aware, of course, of the challenges that were then existing. For instance, the challenges of the technical skills required, the funding, and even the broader issues to do with the marketing of the resources. So this is why you noted that at 1980 to around 1990, the government was focused on educating its people first, so that they could produce a crop of technical persons who would then manage, who would then be involved more skillfully into these areas that I've mentioned. So talking of agriculture, we are aware that we do not even own land, right? And if we did, that was very peripheral. And one big step that we did was to then acquire the land itself.
Dr. Kusena,
yes.
One big step was to acquire the land itself.
Yes.
That's where we're going to take it from when we go into the second segment. That's Dr. Bernard Kusena, who is an economic historian. And today we are talking about economic liberation in Africa and zeroing in on Zimbabwe, considering that this year we are also hosting the Southern Africa Bloc, which is the Southern Africa Development Community, which started off as a development coordinating conference. But the whole purpose was to make sure that we strengthen our industrialization and our economies. So join us in the second segment of Economic Forum. At the end of the last segment, Dr. Kusena, who is our guest here, had already started to talk about how we as Zimbabweans moved towards liberalizing ourselves economically. Because today our focus is on African economic liberation. Let's take it from there.
Thank you, John. When I alluded to land, I was emphasizing the point that our first step towards economic independence was to acquire the land, knowing too well that land is the mainstay of any economy worldwide. So for us as Zimbabweans, we were tied hands and feet by history, because it was not possible at that point in 1980 to take the land immediately on independence, because there were agreements that were reached, at the Lancaster and so on, that the land would be sold on a willing seller, willing buyer basis for at least about 10 years. So it was after 1990 when it was becoming quicker to get more and more land. And as you are aware, by 2000, it was increasingly becoming important to become radical because of the resistance that was, that these whites were posing on our efforts to acquire the land. So we wanted to think that we are in the right direction since then, when land was redistributed, in order for them, for the African majority, the Zimbabwean population, to begin to make sense, of their own resources, which they were not able to do during this colonial period. You see, so when we talk of land, we know that there were many shortfalls, there were many problems for the newly resettled, farmers, because if you look back into history, you will notice that the white dispensation used to have loans, used to have money to support agriculture. In my reading of economic history of this country, I learned that it was the state then that was responsible for ensuring that the farmers were on the ground, right? But in this present moment, we had problems in doing the same, because first we had to deal with the legacy of colonialism, which drew us back in a very significant way from quickly embracing the development in terms of land, by which we mean quickly going onto the ground, produce. Even the markets were also shattered. When the new farmers moved in, the markets were shattered, because remember, I noticed in my reading that in the colonial period, the whites were able to penetrate the international market. And because of the nature of land acquisition that we had embarked on, which icked these whites, they shattered the markets. So we're up again to try and reorganize our markets, which is quite, well, it might be slow. Yes, we are aware it is slow, but it's sure. So I want to re-emphasize the point that with the land, we have now moved into a new gear where we can now reshape our economic direction. We can now use the land to produce, first to meet self-sufficiency, because any nation should be worried about self-sufficiency, which is one key thing that we must focus on: food availability. Before we talk about industrialization, this man, we need to ensure that we have produced, from the land enough, raw materials, enough food, and whatnot. Yeah. Then we move into the next gear and so on and so on. Yeah. So this is what I was trying to point out in terms of land acquisition.
In fact, it's apt that you pointed that out, and that as we meet as SADC in Zimbabwe, yes, where our president is going to take over the leadership for the coming year, one thing that has been emphasized, and it has been emphasized even before, is industrialization. To have an industrialized SADC, so that whatever we grow, it's also beneficiated within our countries, and it makes our region or our bloc grow. So is it something that we are doing well as the region, considering that we're taking over SADC?
I want to believe that the taking over of the chairmanship of SADC is a very big step in the right direction, and we want to support that move, because the issue of SADC as a regional body is key to our development on the economic front as Zimbabwe, because we then interface with the other African countries, other SADC countries, on a one-to-one basis, which means we have more friends, we have more markets. We can, as we interface, we are able to identify what we need as a country, where we lack, right? Where is our advantage in terms of production, you see, and where are the gaps. Now, if we do that, and we are in the chair, I think we are better placed then to be able to leverage on the what SADC produces. But coming back to your question of industrialization, quickly I want to say that in the University of Zimbabwe, where I serve as an economic historian, I'm happy to indicate that we already have the pillar of industrialization added to the three pillars that we used to have in the university. That is teaching, community service, research. Now there's this industrialization and innovation, which is a good foundation for all and sundry to redirect their focus and really gear their attention to economic development. Because without industrialization, we're not talking. Whatever pace we have, whether it is slow or not, what is important is that we are on the path towards industrialization.
That's Dr. Bernard Kusena, who is our guest today, and we're discussing economic liberation in the context of us taking over the chairmanship of SADC, where, again, our main theme in the region is to do with enhancing our industrialization. So join us in the third and final part of Economic Forum. We are friends to all and enemies to none. So says our president, Dr. Emmerson Mnangagwa, each time when he is talking about our economic freedom. And this is what we're talking about here, economic liberation, with our guest, who is Dr. Bernard Kusena. Yes, while we're friends to all, while we attend the Commonwealth, if we rejoin the UN and many other conferences, how do we remain focused on our own liberation so that we're not carried away by the views and actions of others?
Thank you, John. Yes, that is a very important observation, very important question. Whether we associate with anyone from which part of the world, we must maintain our identity. That is key, our identity. Who are we? So we are guided by the ethos of the country, the ethos of liberation. We fought in a war for many years, nearly 15 years.
For a purpose.
For a purpose. And with that in mind, we cannot afford to just overnight forget that kind of history, because then we will lose identity and it would look like amnesia, groping in the dark in search of identity. Yes. So when we interface with the world, we wanted to take from them what we may not be really skilled in, areas that we think we need to learn. But we also need to educate them. It's never one way. Learning is a two-way process, and we learn from everyone. Now, when we talk about the groupings like SADC, just like ECOWAS and so on, we think that these groups increase the relationships that already exist. The integration into these groupings will aid individual countries to map their own participation in the regional economy, with a view to making faster progress in economic emancipation. So I have often listened carefully to the efforts that are being put to rejoin the Commonwealth. But with the continued effort, and as you are saying, that we are friends to all and enemy to none, it means we are still open as a country to embrace this integration, this relationship. So I would want to believe that at some point in time, we will get to a point where we will be readmitted into the Commonwealth with a view to expanding our influence worldwide, global influence. Already, of course, we are doing that. We may not even actually be involved be part of the Commonwealth, but we are already known. The issue is not about the frequency or numbers and so on. It's about the step by step. It might take long, but even in succeeding generations who appreciate that a brick was laid in 2024, a brick was laid in 2023. So if everyone takes their role, everyone participates in this economy, then at some point in time we'll be able to reflect and enjoy the fruits of those efforts. Yes.
The multinational corporations, are they still as strong as they were? Because again, they were another vehicle that was used in order to continue dominating the independent countries. Are we seeing them being or towing the line?
I don't think they will have that leeway anymore, because Zimbabwe is now very conscious about some of the negative aspects of MNCs. We are not also saying they're bad in a sense, but we compete. We compete, and I want to point out that in my study of law, international law, I noted that the MNCs are a law unto themselves. They can be MNS. I think I've heard them. They can even fund terrorism. They can do anything. They can rob countries of their economies in a way. But what we need to do is that as we have them amongst us, we must get good policies to guide them, and we must always check what locals can do, right, and what they cannot do, which needs to be done, right. And so we take from the MNCs. They are part of us, but not with that dictatorial kind of direction to our own interests. I think we need to guide them. We provide them with the policy. If they are unable to operate anymore, yes, it's regrettable, but I don't think it's something that we can be worried about, because we want at the end to ensure that Africans participate in the economy at a more serious level, not just as laborers, just as the so-called African cheap labor. No, but as entrepreneurs, people who are also bringing up their own small businesses, towards economic sovereignty, economic independence. Because there is a problem if a nation is dependent, in its economic interests on other external forces.
Yes.
It is better we begin on a process where the economy belongs to us. We shape it, but we also learn from international players.
Well, we have to wind up a very interesting discussion about African economic liberation with all these examples you gave about Zimbabwe. Maybe in a few seconds, if the SADC delegates were watching you, what would you upload them for up to this point?
One thing is to just re-emphasize that they are welcome to the nation, and we need to share experiences. It is one thing. There's an advantage in just sharing experiences. It will trigger new thoughts, new behavior, new thinking.
Dr. Kusena, I'll stop you there, and thank you very much for talking to us. That's Dr. Kusena talking to us about African economic liberation, and also bringing in the significance of actually holding the SADC summit in Zimbabwe, and having our leader being the torchbearer in the next months, so that his vision for SADC can also be realized. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen. If you also want to engage with us, especially with some of the issues about economic liberation, which we have been deliberating here with Dr. Bernard Kusena, you can also do that on the social media platforms that again are showing on your screen. If you have missed some of the episodes of Economic Forum, you can watch them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So on behalf of our guest, Dr. Bernard Kusena, who is an economic historian, and also, as he said, welcoming all those who have come for the SADC, and on behalf of the production crew, this is John Masugu wishing you happy viewing.